We're going to call the Finance Committee for Lancaster City Council to order. It is 6 p.m.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that Finance Committee convene into executive session to consider the purchase of property for public purposes as premature disclosure of such information would give an unfair competitive or bargaining advantage to another whose personal private interest is adverse to the general public interest pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 121.22G2. The executive session should include the following individuals: Finance Committee members, Lancaster City Council President and members, Mayor, Law Director, Treasurer, Service Safety Director, Auditor, and Fire Chief.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to convene into executive session. Mrs. Kreitz, roll call vote.
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
I am a yes. We are in an executive session. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we. Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we resume the regularly scheduled Finance Committee meeting at this time.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to resume the regularly scheduled Finance Committee meeting. Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. We are back on our agenda for the Finance Committee for this evening. It is 6:15. First item we have on our agenda is a resolution to accept and approve Lancaster Public Transit System Zero Tolerance Drug and Alcohol Testing Policy as approved by the Ohio Department of Transportation on July 21st, 2023, and to authorize updates to be made as needed by the director. It's coming out of Public Works. Mr. Schoonover.
Yes, thank you. So how we've done this here and there over the years. The big addition to this, the change is now for drug testing, they'll allow mouth swab as one of the tests. So there's a slight change that the state wants as part of the policy update. And that's pretty well it. So it can go 3 readings, and if Mr. James would be my second.
3 readings, and Mr. James will be the second. Next item we have on the agenda is Resolution 8123, a resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate of other sources and appropriations with the county auditor, increase receipts in the wastewater reserve fund, and approve the issuance of a then and now certificate for payment of bills for the Ohio Water Development Loan for the Lateral D Trunk Sewer Phase 2 Campground Road Pump Station, coming out of Water Wastewater. Mr. James.
Thank you, Chairman McDaniel. I'm going to invite Ms. Denise Cruz to the podium to give us just a little more explanation of this particular piece of legislation.
Good evening. This piece is really just bookkeeping. It's no city funds involved in this. We've signed the loan papers for the Lateral D Trunk Sewer Campground Road Pump Station project with Ohio Water Development Authority, and this just allows us to appropriate money into funds so the auditor can track the funds in accordance with the state auditor's requirements. So it's kind of a keeping track of funds that OWDA pays for us and also keeping track of funds that OWDA reimburses us.
Any questions for Denise? Mr. James, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Matlin will be my second, and 3 readings will be appropriate.
3 readings on 8123, and Mr. Madden is the second.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item we have on our agenda, Resolution 8223, a resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate with the county auditor and the general fund for additional funding for the sidewalk repair reimbursement program. This is a Finance Committee sponsored item, and I don't know, is Cecil here?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Please come up and you can explain this for us.
Introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Cecil Haynes, City Right-of-Way Manager. So the sidewalk program, I think many of you are familiar with, we've had for the last couple of years. We have committed the entire $150,000 budget for this year, seeking an additional $50,000. We've received an additional 11 applications as of date of approximately $30,000 in value, and I expect to probably receive a few more before the end of the year.
Cecil, remind me what we spent in 21 and 22, if you
Sure.
would.
So in 2021, we received a $100,000 budget. We only spent $13,572. Of course, the program wasn't approved until September, so we only had a couple months there to get the program started. In 2022, we spent $76,281 of a $150,000 budget. We received 40 applications with 30 participants. And then, of course, said this year we're at $90,756 used to date, but have committed the entire $150,000 budget.
Questions? Mr. Matlin?
I didn't talk to you before, so if you don't know, that's fine. But do you know how many feet of sidewalk we're talking about? Like a good guess, or?
It varies because of width. There's some 5, 6, 7 foot. There's even some 8-foot widths. It's been impactful. I can get you that number. I certainly can. Get
I know the mayor sent out something. A lot of it's in the third ward, I know, so I appreciate that.
A bunch of it ended up being in the third ward this year.
Yeah, I went through the list and counted the properties today. There are over 60 properties, not included the ones we haven't spent money on yet, that have had sidewalks replaced so far in the 3 years of the program.
It's starting to make an impact, if especially like I said, in the third ward. If you drive down Allen Street, Fifth Avenue over there in that area, you'll see the impact.
Right.
Other questions? One follow-up comment. If you recall, this was an item that was specifically discussed when we passed the income tax levy to fund this particular program. Both 20 and 21, we would have had money carried over had we had that provision in place. And that money may have been available today should we have carried it forward. So, I think this is a great program. I personally support it. I'm going to ask Mr. Ailes to second this and ask for suspension tonight to try to keep this program moving forward. Thank you. The next item we have on our agenda is Resolution 8323, a resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to dispense with competitive bidding and enter into a contract with Chapman Ford according to the State of Ohio's Cooperative Purchasing Program for the purchase of 2 police vehicles for use by the Lancaster Police Department and declare an emergency. Chief Snyder is here. If he would come up and explain this to us.
Good evening. This purchase is for 2 vehicles, 2 police cruisers that we were budgeted for. We have the money in our account for. Simply, we're buying 2 at once, so it goes over the current $50,000 threshold. Therefore, I need authorization for the purchase of the 2 vehicles. The emergency side of it is, as you know, the last 2 to 3 years, Ford has had pretty awful manufacturing delays for police cruisers, one that we deal with every year. And even to this point this year, we've not received all our cruisers that, you ask for in January. So it's a problem. So we had to go out and find these 2 cruisers that are on a lot at Chapman Ford in Marysville, Ohio. They are physically on the lot. We sent them a letter of intent to buy, and I want to reiterate, this is in our budget. We were expecting these 2 vehicles anyway, but it's just a quicker way to get vehicles back to our officers.
Yeah, it's safe to say if Lancaster Police doesn't grab them, somebody else will grab them pretty quickly.
We were told those words on the phone.
I'm
Absolutely,
sure.
yes.
Any questions for Chief Snyder? Again, this was a planned for budgeted item. He just needs the authorization to go ahead with the purchase.
Are you prepared to talk about next year's cruisers? Or you want to do that at a different time?
Yes, sir. I understand departmental updates are being
Okay.
passed over, so I can do it now if that's appropriate.
If you want to bring it up, I think. we'll
Part
talk about
of our plan as an agency to try to attack this problem, like I've said, we've dealt with this the last 3 years, and it's pretty awful on the officers not having enough vehicles to get out to the citizens, and our repair costs go through the roof when you can't change out these cruisers. I've said it before, but I'll re-explain that a 2017 Ford police cruiser right now is not like a 2017 Explorer that you would drive around. They're ran 24 hours a day on 8-hour shifts going up and down alleys. They break fast, and typically the lifespan of a cruiser is around 3 to 4 years with our call volume. To get ahead of this, I have reached out to several other agencies to see how they do it well. The agencies that are getting cruisers on their lot, and Ford has 3 ordering windows, one in the late summer, one in the late summer, one in the winter, and then one at the beginning of the year. And just by statute alone, we typically budget and get allocated funds for first of the year purchases. So we're in that 3rd window typically. A lot of that delay is due to that. So other agencies, they are able to order in that 1st window, that October to November window, and that will get you a vehicle back to your agency within 2 to 3 months, right around that time frame, right around the beginning of the year. So Ford has already sent out information this year that to combat the problem of availability, they're going to only open up one ordering window. It'll be a long one, but it'll start in October. And discuss this with some members of the safety committee and with Director Martin. What I'd like to explore is the possibility to allow us to order at the beginning of that window and just continue doing that moving forward so we can get out from under this problem. I do believe it will be a resolve. I don't think it'll be unsuccessful. I'm very confident it'll be a successful solution. The only issue is we got to make that initial punch in October that I wasn't prepared for because I did not know they were going to make this move to one ordering window. So in order to get in front of that, I would like to place the orders sometime in October to try to get these cruisers in for our officers. That is not a resolution I'm prepared for tonight. I'm just putting the information out there. I'll further discuss that with the committee and
We'd like to introduce that next council and get 3 readings on that, so if it meets your approval, we'd have it done at the end of September.
And it sounds like it'd be the norm for the rest of, so even though we talked and this would be part of the 24 budget, it sounds like we probably need to figure out a way to put some money in the 24 budget so we can do it next fall also.
Yeah, it's that getting caught up phase. So yes, you're going to spend additional funds to get caught up, but I could show you the math. We're getting killed by just delaying these cruisers because we can't switch them out in time, and our repair costs are going through the roof. And it's the unavailability too is not a cost you see on a sheet, but it's a very big frustration.
Good information. Any other questions? I would add that these cruisers will accrue anywhere from 150 and in some cases 300 miles a day, depending on
Yes, sir.
activity level. So it's something to keep in mind. If your POV is getting 300 miles a day, 20, every day of the year, that's a lot of mileage and a lot of wear and tear.
Yes, a lot of start stopping and city driving and the brake. It's not normal wear and tear. It's awful.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna ask Mrs. Kreitz to second this. I'm going to ask for suspension.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. The next item we have on our agenda is resolution authorizing it's 8423, and it's resolution authorizing the City of Lancaster to apply for grant funding from the Ohio Department of Development. It's coming out of Economic Development. Mr. Ailes.
Yes. See, Linda's making her way to the mic.
Great.
Thank you.
Good evening. Linda Berge-Disser, Community Development Director and City Grant Writer. So this is the application to apply for a grant from the state, the Ohio Department of Development. This is an opportunity for a $250,000 grant for energy-related improvements. And we did do an energy audit of all city-owned facilities. So we would go through that list and choose up to $250,000 worth of the highest priority projects. And Service Safety Director Martin wants to refer to that energy audit.
So we didn't, just to clarify, we didn't literally do every building, but we did substantial buildings, and there's more out there. But these funds could be used for actually to help with the lighting issues in City Hall, the annex building, and also the police department. One of the biggest issues we saw was in parks. Some of the buildings in parks could probably have that improvement done as well, especially the old junior high school that now is a major building for the parks department. Spent a lot of time in there, a lot of improvements. I mean, that's probably close to the sum ones we have, some other buildings in the enterprise departments. But it would be wonderful. We would not have a problem finding a way to spend this money because we've not done too much improvement when it comes to lighting specifically, and maybe some other cost saving. HVAC, this energy audit also included some HVAC issues. We would be more than capable of spending all of it. I hope it comes through.
And there is no match requirement. Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, no match requirement. We did not ask for suspension, although if you would grant suspension, we would apply as soon as approved to apply. There is no funding window. Usually there's a deadline where all applications are accepted and then they review all the applications at once. In this case, they're accepting applications and reviewing them as they come in and granting the funds as applications are approved. So
So if we wait, is there a chance that we won't get 250,000?
There's a chance that the funds will all be spent. I don't want to say the sky is falling, but that's, the sooner the better.
I know that we're trying not to suspend on
Yeah.
legislation, but I think in this case, we probably should.
Thank you.
So I'm prepared to do
Questions
that.
on this? Anyone? But I think Mr. Ailes, I agree. This is, we're asking for
Yeah.
money from an outside source. We're not spending money.
Right.
When we do these grants like this, if we go ahead and like suspend it, the quicker we get in, they'll see our name first, because isn't that kind of how that works? So it's best to do it instead of wait till the deadline to do any grants.
Exactly.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Corey is my second on this.
Corey is the second, and we're going to ask for suspension.
Yes.
All right, suspension on 8423.
Thank you.
8523 and 8623 are similar resolutions, and the resolution to create a new fund for One Ohio opioid settlement funds and to set up a revenue and expense account. And 86 is the Timber Top TIF and set up a revenue and expense account. And I thought I'd just let Auditor Nettles address both of those if she would.
Yeah, we have, of course, we've been receiving the One Ohio opioid settlement monies. They've been coming in, and an Auditor State Bulletin 2022-003 requires us to set up a fund to place these monies in, to be accountable for those expenses, because those will probably be audited or will be audited. And for that fund, and of course, the Timber Top Fund, the Timber Top TIF agreement is also requiring a fund to place once the county auditor does the settlement. So it'll be a separate settlement that we get, like we get the Edie Road TIF. We'll get a Timber Top TIF settlement monies that come in separately, and we are required to put those monies so they can be easily tracked and then to be reimbursed to the developer of Timber Top.
Okay, thank you. That seems pretty straightforward. Any questions for the auditor on this? So on 8523, I'll ask Mr. Sprague to second that, and we'll have two readings. 8623, Mr. Ailes, would you second that?
Yes.
And two readings also. The next item we have on our agenda is 8723, a resolution to amend the certificate of appropriations and other sources with the county auditor and appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the general fund, increase receipts and complete fund transfer into the special projects fund. This is sponsored by Finance, and I'm going to ask Court Administrator Jackie Long to come forward on that, or both of you.
I don't know. The judge can come too, right? Come on,
Yes,
Judge.
absolutely,
Come
both of you
on.
can come. I didn't mean to have favorites there or anything, but.
No, please. We are requesting $10,500 to assist us in making some major repairs to 3 of our HVAC units. We've tried since 2013 when we purchased the property and renovated the building to do everything on our own, but this $10,500 is almost the full amount that we spend on our HVAC every year. So we got hit this year with some major repairs that needed done. Also, the roof was leaking, and the fire inspector can tell you that we had some major damage to ceiling tiles from a roof leak. They're going to be able to patch that rubber roof for us to stop the leaking from happening, but we did have a roof inspection done, and we didn't get great news on that.
Why are you looking at me? I didn't do it.
They're telling us that there's a potential of $400,000 to do major repairs to the roof coming up here in the next 5 to 10 years. So we do want to make council aware of that.
Questions for Judge Fields or
Yeah.
Jackie?
I try not to come and ask for much. I don't, because I like to be self-sufficient, but there are times that we do need some help, and we appreciate the help that we do receive from you. I just am disappointed that the only time you ever see me is when I want money. But otherwise, people don't want to see me anyway, so that's I've accepted that. But yeah, the air conditioning, we've battled for probably 3 years. I haven't had air conditioning in my office for probably a year and a half. And I'm already grumpy, so it just makes me grumpier.
But we had to get that fixed, and then the roof really surprised us. I mean, the building's 100 and some years old, but for us, it's 8 years old, so the roof was a surprise. The patch, originally, we thought we'd be asking for $20,000 to fix that area of the roof, but they were able to patch it. But then they sprung on us the fact that the rubber roof is, I don't know, melting or whatever, but they're projecting that in the next 5 to 10 years, it'll be about a $400,000 fix. And probably the roof is probably one of the major things, because if it falls in, I'm on the second floor, so it doesn't matter to me. But third floor would really be unhappy. Judge Oldham would be unhappy. So we'd appreciate your help.
Any other questions? President Oldham?
So please don't mistake the fit that I'm about to have being directed at you, because it's not, but do we have an issue? 8 years is all this building is old, and we're having these kind of issues.
We've
And-
had these issues for 8 years.
I know,
Yeah.
I know we have, and so are we just stuck and that's the way it goes and there's nothing we can do about this? Or we have some sort of deficiency with regard to construction, or?
I think there was a battle between the city prosecutor and Elford back in the day, and we didn't pay them a large sum of money at the end of our contract because of deficiencies.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that part.
Yeah, again, the beauty thing for me is my name's on the top of the plaque, but I had nothing to do with it.
Right.
But I got the top of the plaque. But yeah, it's my understanding that from Judge Oldham, there was a battle at the end over a lot of the, like the air conditioning. Again, I think the bidder was from Mexico or something of that nature, and we couldn't even get parts. So we've had to replace units. And then the roof, there's an area of the roof where it's supposed to funnel down to a certain spot. Well, that spot in the roof is higher than the rest of the roof. So the water goes there and then sits and then bakes in the sun for the rubber roof. That's my understanding. So yeah, the elevators, they're an adventure.
Yeah, I don't ride those.
I like living on the edge. So.
You ride them?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
all the
gracious.
time. Yeah, so, but no, I've agreed, because that was part of my thought, but we did have that settlement at the end, but, and it is an old building, so I understand that, but there's a lot that I worry about in the future. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So I would say, based on my time on council, the courts have handled these repairs out of your special projects fund. Is that where you take it?
Correct.
Yes.
And it's pretty unusual for them to come forward to ask for additional funding for building repairs, so I'm going to ask Mrs. Kreitz to second this and have 2 readings on it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item we have on our agenda is Resolution 8823, a resolution of intent to transfer assets and operations of Lancaster Fairfield Public Transit to Fairfield County. This is coming out of Public Works, Mr. Schoonover.
Thank you. I thought you were gonna read that whole little
I'm going to
blurb.
let you do that.
You want me to read it? I
No,
can
this-
summarize it. How about that?
We're just going to have a discussion about it.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's just as it sounds. So we had a Public Works meeting last week. Yeah, last week. Not really start the discussion, but kind of get a little more in depth on this. So, we have it set up for 2 readings because there's already been discussion with the state on how to handle it. I think for us that have been around a little while and the progression of transit, it makes sense to make it a county agency. There's more opportunity for additional federal dollars, which is a big thing. So I think detail-wise, it's explained pretty well in here, but, we wanted to use this meeting to kind of get it out there and then ask your questions and then chew on it, and then next meeting, when we ask for suspension for the timing for the state grant deadlines are coming about, so we're trying to kind of work through that. So this would be the time for your entry-level questions, and then once we chew on it for another 2 weeks to get more in depth with it as well. And then we'll have Commissioner Davis is here, I think during the regular meeting, when we have more of a discussion about it, would make sense for you to come up. throw them out there.
So
Mr.
for me,
Brown.
this seems like a big deal. What happens to our employees? I mean, we have a young lady that runs the place, and what happens to them? Are they guaranteed jobs with the county, or is that as good a job with the county as far as pay and all those things?
Commissioner Davis can answer a couple of those questions for us.
Yeah, I didn't mean to insert myself, but it sounded like
Yeah.
that was up my alley. We view the current employees to be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. We would need to, we would take them at existing pay rates. That does cause some collateral complications with our scales for other similarly situated employees at county level. But we'd be looking to bring our folks up, so to speak, instead of take your folks down. So we would envision bringing everybody over. There are a couple issues that we've thought about that we want to just reserve a little room on that issue. One, when they transfer, they're technically transferring to a new employer, which requires a new drug test. So we need to do that. The other thing that we've not heard anything about, so I'm not playing hide the ball with you, but let's just say hypothetically, if an employee or two wasn't enamored with the idea of transfer, they'd be thanked and excused. We need people who are as excited about this as we are.
Questions for Commissioner Davis while he's up there? So I was able to attend the Public Works meeting, and in our, on our agenda, I've listed some of the discussion points, but I think it's important to know that what is proposed is that service for the citizens of Lancaster will continue as it is, and the operations would be very similar. It would just be coordinated by the county, and this is an opportunity for other parts of the county which are underserved or unserved to actually see some benefits from Lancaster Fairfield Public Transit or Fairfield Public Transit, whatever the name might eventually be. But there currently is no anticipated loss of service for the city. We would continue to provide, as I believe we should, the same level of funding that we currently provide to Lancaster Public Transit. Understand we already provide facilities for Lancaster Public Transit. It is envisioned that we would donate those facilities in some kind of in-kind funding source that might enhance our ability to get grants down the road for this public transit system. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that, and we also, I would add that the transit vehicles were purchased from federal grant funds, and we would obviously transfer those assets also, and the county would assume control of those assets. I don't personally see a drawback for the citizens of Lancaster or for the city of Lancaster in that we don't lose anything, but the citizens of Fairfield County are likely to gain significant benefit from the transfer. Just my 2 cents worth. Yes, Mayor.
So we should probably add that ODOT has recommended that this transfer take place July 1st of 2024, based on a conglomeration of different fiscal year ends. And this legislation does not detail any contractual terms for that transfer at all, because we're not at that position, but there is a grant application that's due September 11th, and ODOT has recommended that the county apply for that grant and could do so if we pass legislation that we intend to transfer the transit authority to the county on July 1st, 2024. So that's all this legislation says, that we intend to do that. There are certainly lots of details to be worked out, which will be done sometime over the next 9 months.
Could I answer one more question that wasn't asked, Councilman? During the committee meeting on Friday, the question that you asked about employees was asked and answered about the same as I did here tonight. Another question that was asked, which I thought was a real good question, was, okay, once we transfer and we've got these services that are operating the city, what's our mechanism for having a voice in the operation of transit once it goes over? You know, how can we kind of protect our interests, so to speak? In there's nothing written in stone. It could be part of the discussions that we need to have about the mechanics of transfer, but the leading thought right now is to have an advisory council that would have representatives certainly of the city, hopefully major employers, because that's a big part of what we're trying to figure out here is getting people that want to work to work, and perhaps even representatives of consumers. But we do envision having that district advisory. One thing I made clear on that point is we're not talking about, hey, let's have a committee do it, and then the commissioners walk away. We're going to take responsibility for what we're advocating here, but we would have that format as envisioned currently to make sure that the city does have a voice in that process. And if it's okay, I'd have more to say when we have our regular meeting, but I just walked up here because it sounded like I was on point.
We appreciate that. Any other questions? Good. Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Mr. Schoonover, what's your pleasure on this?
Mr. James is going to be my second, and then we're going to be asking for 2 readings.
2 readings. Mr. James is second.
That's correct.
The next item on our agenda is Ordinance 1623. It's ordinance to amend the permanent ordinance 1323, repeal and replace existing permanent ordinance 1323. This is coming out of economic development. Mr. Ailes.
Yes, Linda again. Thank you.
So Bob Sulik is ready to retire from the Community Development Department. I know, Jack, it is very concerning. Sorry to spring it on you like that. And he has requested to go part-time for the rest of the calendar year. So I would have thought that going from full-time already approved to part-time would have been no-brainer, but not so. So I'll have Law Director Hall give us a little bit more information about why we need to get your approval for this.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Didn't know you were going to toss it to me. The auditor actually sent out a very informative email advising, I believe, at least the members of Finance Committee or Economic Development maybe, of why it works that way. But essentially, City Council approves the number of positions and the rate at which they're paid through our pay ordinances. So if we have, positions in the pay ordinance, we can't just change those positions without that coming back before City Council and you signing off on that change. Otherwise, I could go out and hire 2 civil attorneys and make my life much easier. But I can't because you have not authorized that. So you just have to authorize a change from, I think it's 2 full-time, or is it
One full-time, one part-time.
Sorry, 1 full-time, 1 part-time, down to 2 part-time at this point, so that the auditor knows how she is authorized to pay those folks according to your desires.
Yes, your private sector, lifetime member, private sector asked that question, why is this so hard? So thank you.
And just a caveat, when state audit comes every year, they collect all of the city salary ordinances, all the union contracts and such. They keep those on file. And that is how, when they go through and they audit payroll, that's how they audit payroll, by council's wishes or a union contract's wishes, to make sure I'm in compliant with what we have on file.
I get it now. I didn't, but I do now. It's the government.
Exactly.
Bureaucracy.
Trying to help.
It's finest.
Mrs. Turner.
Us private sector guys have a little issue
Yeah.
with that, but hey.
Got a little leeway when it
Yeah.
comes to things like that.
Mrs. Turner has a
So
question.
since you're doing that, so what are you gonna do for next year then? Are you going to?
Next year, we'll go back to what we have right now, 1 full-time, 1 part-time. So I will advertise to replace Bob. Well, there is no replacement, but to hire another full-time person in his position.
Any other questions? Thank you. Mr. Ailes, what's your pleasure?
As I understand, there's no, we can do 3 readings on this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
So
Mr.
3
Schoonover's
readings.
second. 3 readings. Sounds good, thank you. Next item on our agenda is ordinance 1723, an ordinance to authorize the mayor to negotiate and enter into a contract or an agreement to purchase real property from Anchor Hocking LLC and declare an emergency. Coming out of safety, Mr. Matlin.
Yeah, we had a meeting about this already, and unfortunately, Mr. Ehlers wasn't there. Are you okay with seconding this? I think we're gonna ask for suspension and try to get it done tonight.
Mayor Scheffler, you want to give a quick overview of what we're talking about?
Sure, we've long needed to replace Engine House 2, which is on the west side of town. And after searching and investigating properties for 3 or 4 years now, we finally found a property that fits the need, is in the right location, and is the right price at $86,000. So Anchor Hocking has agreed to sell it to us. It's formerly been a parking lot right at the corner of Pierce and 6th, and it's just about a block and a half from the existing firehouse. So
Thank you for those comments.
yeah, we're ready to go.
Any questions on this other than what we've already answered in executive session? So this is pretty straightforward. We've been looking for a place for the fire department to update their facilities for some time. And some of the prices of property that we've looked at have been extremely, $200,000 to $300,000 for a small parcel.
Much higher than that, yeah.
Yeah. I know a couple of them were crazy numbers, and they didn't really want to sell to begin with. So what's your pleasure on this?
Like I said, we're going to ask for suspension for do one reading with Mr. Ayler's being the second.
Mr. Ayler's second, we'll ask for suspension. The last item on the Finance Committee agenda is Ordinance 1823, an ordinance authorizing joint economic development district contract between the City of Lancaster and Violet Township and to declare an emergency. Coming out of Economic Development, Mr. Ailes.
Mayor, are you going to address this?
Sure.
Thank you.
It's not possible to do it in 20 words or less, but we have been approached by Violet Township to participate with them in a JED, and that's a Joint Economic Development District, which is a very popular way to raise taxes for typically a township that doesn't have taxing authority. And the way it works is they will impose the city income tax rate on the businesses in the district that's established by the JED, and the city of Lancaster would collect the tax and keep a portion to cover our cost of collection and administration, and the balance would go back to the township to utilize for creating infrastructure for the development that is expected to go on there. Interestingly, Violet Township is not adjacent to the city of Lancaster, which you would typically think is the case, but the Ohio Revised Code allows for one jurisdiction to be skipped in order to accommodate this. So I believe Liberty Township is between us and a very small portion of Violet touches Liberty, which is the intervening township. So legally, we can do it. The reason they want to use Lancaster as opposed to the city of Columbus or Reynoldsburg or Canal Winchester or Pickerington is because our tax rate is higher. They have an existing JED with Canal Winchester covering the site that's going to be the DHL warehouse just north of Route 33. They prefer to work with us. The Pickerington income tax rate is 1%, so that the economics of that doesn't work out as appropriately as with the city of Lancaster. And they really don't want to get mixed up with Columbus and Reynoldsburg because of the larger entity and all the bureaucracy that accompanies that. So Law Director Hall, Income Tax Commissioner Hamilton, and myself, and Economic Development Director Stephanie Bosco have been involved in conversations. We pretty much have the details of the agreement worked out. There's a couple little minor details yet to work on, but this is an arrangement that you'll probably see more of in the future with neighboring townships such as Greenfield, possibly Hocking. So it's something that we're going to be asked to do more frequently. There probably won't be any tax collection activity for a couple of years because it's going to take that long for the developments in this district to be built and start generating tax revenue. But Tax Commissioner Hamilton is agreeable to this, thinks it will work very well, and it's done in lots of other places already.
So is there a downside other than we are collecting, we're going to collect a portion of the income?
Yes, we're going to collect
That's
a
the
portion
upside.
which
Is there a
covers,
downside?
yeah, which covers the cost of us doing it. So there's some additional fee for us. It does, I guess, signal an air of cooperation for economic development with the other townships. And you may have seen the article in the Eagle Gazette yesterday about economic development works so well here in the county because all the entities involved work together, get along very well, and cooperate. And this is another step in that direction.
The cost of developing the site, the infrastructure, who's paying for that?
That's all borne by Violet Township. All we do is collect the money and send a portion of it to them. We don't have any responsibility for infrastructure, cost, development.
Maintenance of anything, it's just, okay.
It's an administrative
simple.
function.
It's really simple.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Anyone else have questions? All right, what's your pleasure?
Suspend, if we can, please.
Mr. Schoonover, second.
Yes.
All right. So we are going to forgo department updates tonight because we have quite an extensive council agenda. Unless someone's got something critically important for a department update. Okay. So we're going to move on to tonight's meeting prep with President Poole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We have worked our way through the agenda, but we're inviting City Planner Fayetta up to talk to us a little bit about the amendment to the zoning legislation that is before us tonight.
All right, Felicia Campbell, City Planner. I was just going to take a minute to recap what took place at the Planning Commission meeting last week and walk you through the changes that are shown in the most recent draft of the zoning code that was included in your packets for this evening. In response to the concerns that we heard from council members and some of the members of the public about the architectural requirements, we reached out to the Builders Industry Association of Central Ohio and asked them to review that section again. And they ended up distributing it to their, I think they have over 500 member companies, and they asked them to review it and discussed it at a Fairfield County working group. And then on August 1st, they provided us with a letter endorsing the code and suggesting 2 modifications to the residential requirements. So our previous draft had called for street-facing facades to be comprised of a minimum of 50% of the following materials: brick, stone, cultured or cast stone, wood, board and batten, wood, shake, or fiber cement. And after talking with some of their members, the BIA recommended reducing that minimum requirement from 50% to 35%. And then our previous draft also restricted garage door openings that were 18 feet or less to no more than 35% of the linear distance of the front elevation, and they recommended increasing that from 35% to 42% to accommodate a lot of the smaller scale home designs that are popular right now. So last week, we went to the Planning Commission and proposed several possible amendments to those architectural requirements. In the first version, the requirements were changed to recommendations for all types of development. So anything that said shall essentially was changed to should. And then the second version changed the architectural requirements for residential only to recommendations and left the requirements in place for multifamily, commercial, and industrial developments. So it communicated that it was preferred, but it wasn't enforceable. And then for the third version, Holly Matty, our consultant who wrote this zoning code, drafted some new language that provided relief for infill housing projects. With this change, staff would have the ability to waive any such requirement in cases where the proposed standard fails to harmonize with the prevailing character of the existing neighborhood. And those administrative decisions could always be appealed to the BZA if needed. She incorporated the BIA's recommendations on building materials and garages as well. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to approve Holly's proposed amendment as submitted with no alternates, and that you can find those changes on pages 126 and 127 of that zoning code that was sent out. They also approved changes to the mobile home community and central business district chapters and the zoning map. In the mobile home communities chapter, the development standards table had referenced minimum lot width, but it was actually intended to read minimum front setback. So we just changed that with their approval. And then in the central business district chapter, we proposed to reduce the minimum amount of private gathering space for residential units to 50 square feet from 100 square feet. And that was after further discussion and feedback that we received from local developers. And then they approved a change to the zoning map. Partway through the course of these council readings, we had a multifamily housing developer approach us about a larger parcel of land on South Ewing Street. And the site's currently zoned industrial heavy, and we were just gonna change it to advanced manufacturing, which is kind of like the equivalent of industrial heavy with this new zoning map. But if they went through the traditional rezoning process to change it to multifamily, the timing wouldn't allow them to meet a deadline for a big piece of their funding. So the city proposed to incorporate that change by way of this zoning map update instead. There are 6 abutting parcels along South Ewing Street that we are proposing to include in that change to residential multifamily. Those parcels are currently non-conforming as single-family homes within an industrial district. So the new zoning would make those existing uses legal conforming. It also prevents spot zoning and lower the maximum density, protecting that residential character. And that draft that was included in your packets incorporated all of those changes.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions or would like to discuss this? We do have a public hearing tonight on this. No? Okay, well, thank you very much for explaining those changes, Ms. Campbell. There's no other meeting prep that I'm aware of. I'll turn it back over to the chairman.
Great. Are there any other items for finance? Any other items for finance? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
It is 7:01. The regular meeting of Lancaster City Council will begin at approximately 7:05.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our 2 locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
Hi, I'm Mike Shook with the Ohio Glass Museum. Our museum was established to reflect the importance of the glassmaking industry in the history of Lancaster and Fairfield County. We value the support to help preserve that history. This month, we are honored to be chosen by the Buckeye Automotive Family's Buckeye Cares program. Buckeye Cares will make a generous donation with every car they sell. Thank you, Buckeye family, for helping the Ohio Glass Museum.
evening. Welcome to Lancaster City Council. Please join me in a word of prayer. Father, we thank you for this day and this opportunity to do the work that is set before us once again. Would you please prepare our hearts and minds for what is about to happen? Would you please help us as we continue to move the city of Lancaster forward? Lead, guide, and direct, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. I hereby call this meeting of Lancaster City Council to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers? Here. Mr. Ailes?
Here.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Here.
Mr. James?
Here.
Mr. Matlin?
Here.
Mr. McDaniel?
Here.
Mr. Porter?
Here.
Mr. Schoonover?
Here.
And Mrs. Teener? Here.
Let the record reflect that all 9 members of Lancaster City Council are in attendance this evening. Reading and disposing of the journal.
I'd like to present the regular meeting minutes. I'll get my tongue tied here. Dated July 17th, 2023.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the journal.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the journal. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Reports of city officials.
Email dated July 18th, 2023 regarding the Economic Development Meeting Agenda submitted by Mr. Ailes. Series of emails regarding Service Committee meeting submitted by Mr. Porter. Email dated August 8th, 2023 regarding Public Works Meeting Agenda submitted by Mr. Schoonover. And finally, an email dated August 14th, 2023 regarding the Finance Committee agenda submitted by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of city officials.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file reports of city officials. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are there any communications?
There are 2. Letter dated August 1st, 2023 regarding proposed new zoning code submitted by John Melchi, Executive Director of Building Industry Association of Central Ohio, the BIA, 445 Hutchison Avenue, Columbus, Ohio. And a notice to the Legislative Authority of a new liquor license to BFS Investments, LLC, doing business as Siberios, located at 1416 through 1418 North Columbus Street, Ohio, from submitted by the Ohio Division of Liquor Control.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the communications.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file communications. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We are now to the special presentation and awards portion of tonight, and as mentioned earlier, we have in attendance Commissioner Steve Davis. I also see County Administrator Ani Cordell, so I don't know if you're both coming or if it's just you, Commissioner, but at this time, I know you wanted to address the changes that are happening with Lancaster Public Transit, so please come forward, and the podium is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Fairfield County Board of Commissioners, thank you for giving us an opportunity to address you this evening. It's the end of a long day, so I'm thinking my affect doesn't accurately convey how excited I am about what we're about to do together, I hope. One of the things I mentioned to your committee on Friday, and I wanted to take a minute and share with you, is as you begin a process, let's say that this piece of legislation passes a couple weeks from now or whenever you want to do that. What does that mean? Where are we going? What are we doing? So I thought I'd take a minute and just share a little bit with you about where we think we're going, and then certainly answer any questions or concerns that you all may have about that. First of all, I think it's important to understand that on July 1st, if this all goes, that'll be a very difficult and arduous process, by the way, but let's say it does. What would transit look like? And the answer is exactly as it appeared on June 30th. We're not envisioning like day one, here's what we're doing, it's all different now. No changes. Beyond that and down the road, we have been communicated with by multiple major employers throughout the city and the county. Many of them partners currently with us in the Workforce Development Center, who have expressed to us a wide list of concerns regarding transit impediments. How are they getting the people that want to work to their places of employment? And so we look forward to being a part of that solution. When we were speaking earlier this evening at the Finance Committee meeting, we would anticipate having some employers represented on that advisory committee so that we could hear from them about what their concerns are and how they might be addressed. Beyond that, the vision would be for, in our TO structure, if you will, for the transit to move in under the auspices of workforce development. From the county commissioner's standpoint, our number one priority has been and will continue to be public safety. That's represented in the expenditures we make out of our general fund. Right below that right now is a three-tiered process that we're engaged in, have been for years now, and are continuing to alleviate impediments between people who want to work and employers that want to hire them. If you look at the Workforce Center and what it's doing out there, it's providing programming, largely employer-dictated programming, to students who are either just graduated or about to graduate, and they're getting the skills that the employers are specifically asking for, and many of them are getting hired right out of the gate on day one. So alleviating that skills impediment between the person that wants to work and the person that wants to hire them is what the Workforce Center is doing. We view transit as another form of impediment. Why some people who may want to work aren't getting that opportunity, and we want to alleviate that impediment. A third thing, the third kind of leg of that stool of impediments has to do with, okay, you got the skills, you got a way to get there, where are you going to live? And so the county is engaged in a pretty wide-ranging effort to figure out what we could be doing better as a county in terms of workforce housing, just places for people to live that want to work. So beyond that, and I'm getting kind of down the road a little bit, but we think there are some really, really neat opportunities down the road. When you look at a map of low to moderate income areas throughout the county, and you see some of those blocks, if you will, that aren't served currently by transit, we just know from history and experience and evidence that those areas that are low to moderate income, there are transit difficulties there that are not currently being addressed, and we're interested in that. Again, on down the road, we're keeping our eye on the technology and advancements as it relates to renewable energy and what may or may not be done in the future to try to bring transit along on some of those areas. In my mind's eye, I'll just tell you, I see a point in the far future maybe when a transit bus pulls off and maybe stops for 10 minutes instead of 5 and gets hit with a DC fast charger and moves right along its route. No range problem, no fuel costs. So those are some of the things we're thinking about. I don't want to suggest any of those things as being dyed in the wool and done. That's not what I'm saying. But I did want to kind of give you folks an idea as to what some of the thoughts are that we've had during this past year of pretty significant research. We've got a consultant we've been working with for the last several months, RLS. I think there was mention earlier to some meetings we've had with ODOT. We have had a couple meetings with ODOT, including with the very person who would be reviewing your September 11th application for the coming grant, the one that we would be named the grantee on the resolution that you have tonight. And we are taking some guidance from the people that will actually be reviewing that grant. And so, that's kind of where we weren't sure until literally last week when we met with them what to do with the federal fiscal year, the state fiscal year, our local fiscal year, and how that all married up in terms of doing a transfer like this. And so it was their guidance really that kind of put a little bit of a charge in our timeline to say, literally the guy who would be reviewing that said, well, I think the county should be named the grantee if you're moving in that direction. And I pushed back on that. I said, well, it hadn't happened yet. We didn't make the transfer, and you're telling us to change it already. And he had his reasons for saying he thought that was the best way to go. If, for whatever reason, these discussions, this process falls apart, I guess that can be changed back, is the way I understand it. So I don't see any harm in it in that regard. But we're excited. We have done, I don't want to take up your whole meeting, and I'd probably get cut off before I could, but please know that a tremendous amount of very down-in-the-weeds research, 30,000-foot research, a tremendous amount of research has been done as to what some of the possibilities are for helping folks. last point. Yes, I have described a workforce-centric transit of the future, but I don't want anybody to misunderstand that we recognize that in transit, you got to deal with all the folks that have needs, and we would certainly intend to do that. So that's our play. That's what we're thinking. We would appreciate your support on this, and look forward to continuing in the future to work with the city in the provision of services that people need. I said final point, and I knew I shouldn't have said that as soon as it came out. When you look at the inventory of entities that are providing some slice of the transit pie, so to speak, we do have a question, not an answer, but a question as to whether all those resources are currently being deployed in the most effective way possible. Veteran Services provides some transit. The Center for Disabilities provides some transit. Job and Family Services provides some transit. And of course, Lancaster Fairfield Transit provides transit. And we're kind of wondering if there were such a thing as just an app, so to speak, where someone can say, hey, I need a ride. And even if Lancaster Fairfield Transit, for example, can't right that minute get to that person till 2 weeks from then, roughly, is there any way to kind of utilize the existing resources in a perhaps better way? I'm not being mean towards anybody's current work that they're doing, but there are times a day, and if you folks have been about the community like I have over the past year, you can literally see it. Times when Lancaster Fairfield Transit is really hopping, and maybe some of these other providers aren't hopping that same moment, but yet someone's getting denied. So we're thinking about that too, and I just wanted to mention that. I apologize if I took up too much time, but I'd be happy to answer any questions or concerns that anybody might have.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Anyone have questions?
I think I must have done outstanding.
Outstanding, not a doubt. Well, we appreciate you being here. We appreciate the county's interest in this. You were here several months ago at the front end of this, and as discussions were just getting started. We appreciate you coming again tonight, and look forward to continuing to partner as we move forward with transit.
And I look forward to working with you on behalf of the county through this very difficult transition process. And if I think we can endure the pain of transition, we can all look forward to something that we could all be very proud of. I thank you all for your time and attention.
Thank you very much. All right, are there any petitions or memorials this evening?
There are none to be presented.
During this time, Lancaster City Council sets time aside to allow the voters and taxpayers of the city to address us on any item or issue they would like. If you would like to address Lancaster City Council tonight, we invite you to come to the podium. Sign in on the green clipboard up there, your name and address, and then state the same for the record. Please note that while we may choose to do so at a later time during the meeting, we will not respond to questions or comments during this time. In addition, per the rules of council, we ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. With that, is there anyone who would like to address City Council? As I see Ms. Probasco coming forward, and I know what she wants to talk about, I'll just make one more clarification. This is not the time to talk about the public hearing part of what's going to happen. That portion of the meeting will come later as we talk about the zoning code at that point. So Ms. Probasco, you can go ahead and begin if you like, and then sign in afterwards, or if you're already into it there, you can go and finish. You just do whatever you need to do.
Thank you.
All right.
My name's Debbie Probasco, and I live at 850 2nd Street. I'm here to address you all about the lack of rules, laws, and or punishment for fireworks. I understand the state of Ohio has made them legal, but they've also given the cities, townships, the opportunity to either opt out or to set their own rules, regulations, guidelines, and form of punishment. The most recent fireworks that have gone off is August the 12th, this past Saturday. They also went off Friday night. I don't call the police department to report them unless I have an address. And I have gone out, found out where they're coming from, called it in, and they've responded and put a stop to it. I understand that you all think it's okay, what the state rules, regulations, and guidelines are. But I did some research of my own. Other than what the state of Ohio has put out, the Ohio Fire Code and the Ohio Administrative Code has also put out a set of rules. In their rules, it states that you cannot discharge fireworks within 150 feet of a building, meaning a home, a shed, a garage. You can also not shoot them off on private or on public property, schools, alleys, roadways. All of this is happening in the city of Lancaster, not just in the south end. It's happening on the west side, it's happening on the east side, for sure. When I don't call in and report an address, I put it on Facebook. So if any of you are on my Facebook, you can read all the places in town that this is happening. So I think you as council, and we do have a city law director, I think you need to sit down, come up with your own rules, regulations pertaining to fireworks. I checked the distance between houses in my neighborhood. The distance between the houses are 10 to 25 feet. The widest being a house across the street, which is 2 lots, which isn't 150 feet away from a building. So that being said, and those rules being set forth by the state, how can you say that fireworks are legal in Lancaster? Basically, there's nowhere in Lancaster you can shoot them off. So once you set down the rules, regulations, and guidelines, you need to make that public so that people know that. Because what people aren't paying attention to are the rules and regulations for discharging fireworks. I appreciate your time, and I hope you take this in consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Probasco. We appreciate you being here. Is there anyone else who would like to address Lancaster City Council this evening? Okay, well, thanks to each of you for being here tonight. We will move on then through the agenda. Are there reports of standing committees?
There are Code Enforcement and Zoning Committee meeting minutes dated April 10th, 2023, submitted by Mr. Ehlers. IT Telecom meeting minutes dated May 19th, 2023, submitted by Mrs. Teener. Economic Development Committee meeting minutes dated July 20th, 2023, submitted by Mr. Ailes. Law Committee meeting minutes dated August 2nd, 2023, submitted by Mrs. Kreitz. And finally, the Law Committee meeting minutes, finally, the Finance Committee meeting minutes dated August 14th, 2023, submitted by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of standing committees.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file reports of standing committees. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So the reports of special committees.
There are none to be presented.
We do have a public hearing tonight on temporary ordinance 14-23. Let me attempt to quickly work through the process of how a public hearing happens. In just a moment, I'll ask that the clerk read the preamble of the legislation that is subject of the public hearing tonight. Once she does that, I will turn it over to the sponsor of that legislation for opening comments. Once opening comments have been given, we will then invite those who are proponents, those who are for the legislation, to come forward and to speak. Once proponents are finished, opponents will have an opportunity to come and speak as well. Once that is finished, we will enter into a time of rebuttal, where proponents will have an opportunity to come back and speak one more time. Please note, in order to speak during the second time, the rebuttal portion of the public hearing, Ms. Probasco's time's up. In order to speak the second time, you have to have spoken the first time. So if you don't take the opportunity to speak the first time through, you cannot speak the second time through. Once the second time for proponents passes, then opponents will have an opportunity, and then we will close the public hearing. With that, we'll ask that the clerk read the preamble this evening.
An ordinance to repeal and replace Lancaster Codified Ordinance Part 11, Planning and Zoning Code, Title 3, Zoning Property Restrictions, Chapter 1121 through Chapter 1161, including Appendix B and C of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Lancaster, offered by Mr. Ehlers.
Mr. Ehlers.
Thank you. I just want to start by saying I recognize and I appreciate the amount of work that went into creating this code in, I think, well over 20 years since we last updated it. So other than that, I'm just happy to hear from the public.
Great, thank you very much. With that, we will open it up then to proponents of the legislation, those who are in favor of it, who would like to speak this evening. I see Miss Maddie working her way to the podium. Once you come up, we need you to sign in on the silver grayish clipboard, but you can do so after you work through your comments, Miss Maddie.
Great, thank you. I'm Holly Maddie, Crossroads Community Planning. Just want to take the time to thank you for the opportunity to work with the city council, staff, and the stakeholder committee that went through the 12 to 14-month process that we have taken to get to where we are here today. I also want to take the time to thank you for bringing to our attention the comments regarding the architectural requirements. I feel that we have done a great job of due diligence of reaching out to local developers as well as the Building Industry Association of Central Ohio to understand their viewpoints and to incorporate the minor changes that they had. I also want to point out that when I talked with John Malkai from the Building Industry Association after he wrote the letter, he wanted to let me know that he thought that the zoning code, that the densities in it and the other portions of the code were so favorable to the developers that they were, the architectural standards with those minor changes really are a benefit to them. They've helped them to get this code through, and that they're happy with the code overall. I also want to point out that he did mention that the models that all of the builders are building fit the architectural standards that are as proposed, as amended. So there were those two items that there were some models that were not fitting. So that's why we went ahead and made those proposed changes for the 42% for the garages and the 35% for the natural materials instead of the 50%. I also understand the concerns with the infill development, which is why I proposed the language that's in the amendment and has been proposed for adoption by the Planning Commission as well. So I think that having the opportunity to listen and understand concerns brings a better product, and I'm happy that we can be at this end result, and I hope that we can move forward with adoption of this code tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Maddie. One of the features of a public hearing that's different than public comment time is the opportunity to ask questions or make comments. Is there anyone who has a question for Ms. Maddie this evening? Yes, Mr. Mallon.
So you work with a lot of communities doing this. How often does that community call you back to try to tweak that code the next year or the year after, or?
So I do recommend that all of my communities look at their code at a year time. And I say that I've had to make tweaks here and there to a few, but the zoning documents are living documents. We see things changing all the time at a rapid pace, from solar to any type of thing that you can have that's a different aspect, new type of way of doing things. So it's not so much things that are didn't get done correctly as much as it is new things that pop up over time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mallon. Any other questions for Ms. Maddie? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this legislation? Ms. Everett.
Good evening, Amanda Everett, 201 South High Street, and tonight I am speaking to you in my capacity as Executive Director of Destination Downtown Lancaster and the President of the Special Improvement District. I am extraordinarily thrilled with the product that Holly Maddie and her team with Felicia have produced as far as the zoning code is concerned, specifically the architectural standard that is articulated within the code, specifically with the adaptations that she just mentioned as far as infill are concerned. I would like to share with you that I have had 3 developers that are coming in to do really transformational projects within our city. They have asked about the new zoning code. And one of the things that has inspired them to invest at the level that they're investing is that we have said these are the architectural standards. We as Lancastrians are saying this is where we need to be. We deserve nice things. and I know I throw this quote at you every time I come, whether I'm coming to talk about Dollar Generals or walkability, but it's my favorite quote. It's Winston Churchill. We shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us. People react to the spaces that we create. And we can have nice things and still do it in an economical way. But when we tell developers and the community members around us that this is the level that we are at in Lancaster, from a beauty perspective, from an architectural design perspective, it only leads to positive things. And we're at that level now, and it's something I'm extraordinarily proud of. Our developers, we see that as they come into our community wanting to invest more. We see it in the young talent that wants to move here because we have these standards, and it's extremely exciting. So I couldn't be more thrilled with the zoning as far as it is proposed, and I would encourage you all to take that into consideration. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Everett. Anyone have questions or comments? Okay, if not, we will move on to other proponents, those who are in favor of this.
Stephanie Taylor, Habitat for Humanity of Southeast Ohio. Did I shock everybody by coming up here? No, just kidding. I know we have been a very big voice in a lot of this as we were coming out and trying to discuss, and we first appreciate Holly and her team and the folks that were a part of this listening and hearing what we had to say and getting the clarification on the amendments tonight and what that looks like. It does really truly make it a lot easier for us to continue doing what we're doing as an infill affordable housing builder at this time. And so, we thank you for that piece of it. And I hope that would continue to also pave the way. Again, all of this was not for us to come up here and say Habitat's the only person that we want being considered in the affordable housing realm. We are speaking on behalf of all affordable housing. So I think the changes, especially when it comes to those architectural standards being lowered, but also giving city planner the opportunity to move forward with what fits the neighborhood and infill is really good. So we thank you on that, and we thank City Council for listening to what we have to say as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Does anyone have questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Mallon.
So you are getting ready to build a house on 6th Avenue.
Yes, we are.
Some of the 200 or 300 block, I think.
Yes,
That's like a narrow lot.
it is.
So hypothetically, or however you're going to do it, you'd have to go to the BZA anyway to build that house. Is that true or not?
Nope, not true.
Because it's not I thought the lot was too narrow. Is the new zoning code making it so you would have to go to the BZA either?
Nope.
No, okay.
No. So based on previous code and or new code, we do not have to, and that has already been approved, and we will be breaking ground on Wednesday. So,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mallon. Yes, Ms.
I have
Tina.
a question.
Sure.
So
Yes.
with Habitat, and then, I don't know, maybe somebody else can answer that. Are you guys going to be waived on permits and that where a citizen has to pay? Is that what we're saying here?
No.
Are you guys being waived? Because I
For
think you and I
permitting?
had a conversation that they were going to waive your permits.
No, the conversation that was discussed was if we were going in front of BZA, that the mayor has the ability to waive the 150, but we pay all the permit fees for any permitting.
But they
and-
could be waived.
For permits?
Yeah.
Anyone's could be
Yeah,
waived
anybody's
at
could.
BZA.
We don't ask for it to be. Yeah, but yeah, I mean,
Okay, because you and I had a different conversation.
No, not for permitting, for when you go in front of the BZA, it was
Well,
discussed.
I knew it was for that.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, I didn't misspeak. It was for that, because, I mean, if a resident wants to go in front of the BZA, they're gonna have to pay $150. Okay, okay.
Okay, any other questions for, yes,
I
Mr.
just have a
McDaniel?
comment. I believe the resident can also have
Sure
the
they
fee
can.
waived, should they request it and have a need to have the fee waiver.
Yes, they can. Anyone has the same opportunity that Habitat for Humanity would have in that particular regard. Is that correct? That I understand what we're talking about here? Yeah, okay. Very good. Any other questions for Ms. Taylor? All right, thank you very much. All right, are there other proponents? Mr. Nyheiser. You can sign in after if you just want to go ahead.
Matt Nyheiser, 132 North High Street. At the last city council, I did have an opportunity just to speak about my concern about the proposed code in regards to its impact on affordable housing. And I just wanted to say thank you to those who have heard that and have looked into making these amendments. And just as a resident, I mean, I'm not the only one who spoke or had concerns, but it was nice to know that our voice was heard and responded to, and appreciate that. It's a real relief to hear from Stephanie about Habitat for Humanity being supportive of this. So just thanks for those who have listened.
Thank you, Mr. Nyheiser. Anyone have questions? Okay, while he's signing in, we'll continue on through. Are there other proponents, those in favor of the legislation tonight who would like to speak? Last call for proponents. Seeing none, we will move on to opponent testimony. Is there anyone who opposes this legislation who would like to speak this evening? Okay. Seeing no opponents, we will circle to rebuttal and ask if there is any proponent who would like to say anything, though there's not really anything to rebut since there was no opponents. Anyone who spoke previously who was a proponent would like to speak at this time? If not, no opponent is the ability to speak then, since there were none the first time around, and so we will turn it back over to the sponsor for closing comments.
All I have to finish with is I appreciate the changes that have been brought forward and can move to support that in the end.
Okay, very good. With that, then, we will consider the public hearing for temporary ordinance 14-23 closed. We'll now move on through the agenda for this evening, beginning with the reading of resolutions. Third reading of temporary resolution 71-23.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids for the Fetters Run Ohio University Lancaster Stream Restoration Project, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. James.
Thank you, Chairman Holt. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon a written record temporary resolution numbered 71-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 71-23. Discussion, Mr. James?
Yes, I'd just like to remind everybody that this particular stream restoration is actually worth about $1.7 million, and it comes through a program supported by the Ohio EPA, and it's something that's called the Water Resource Restoration Sponsor Program. Don't ask me to repeat that, please. And in that case, they take the interest that's paid on other projects that we can use to sponsor this, and it costs the city nothing to have this complete area out there, which actually involves a lot of where the festival takes place. So we've got an opportunity here, I think, to take advantage of that.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 71-23 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 74-23.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an engineering agreement for construction administration services on the Independence Boulevard and East Main Street Culvert Replacement Project, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. James.
Thank you, President Holt. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution numbered 74-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 74-23. Discussion, Mr. James.
Just briefly, this has to do with three different culverts that are undersized, one on Independence Avenue and another two out on the east side of town along Route 3022, I believe. And this gives us the opportunity to contract for the services that will actually monitor the progress of the construction project in the amount of about $60,000.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 74-23 passes 9-0. We now have second reading on temporary resolution 77-23.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor, increase receipts, and complete a fund-to-fund transfer in the Stormwater Sewer Fund 6006 and in the Stormwater Reserve Fund 6019, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. James.
Thank you, President Dole. This is the second of three readings.
Second of three readings on temporary resolution 77-23. We now have first reading on a series of resolutions, beginning with temporary resolution 80-23.
A resolution to accept and approve Lancaster Fairfield Public Transit System zero tolerance drug and alcohol testing policy as approved by the Ohio Department of Transportation on July 21st, 2023, and authorize updates to be made as needed by the director, offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. James.
Mr. Schoonover.
First of three readings, please.
First of three readings on temporary resolution 80-23. Temporary resolution 81-23.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate of other sources and appropriations with the county auditor, increase receipts in the wastewater reserve fund 6029, and approve the issuance of then and now certificates for payments of bills for the Ohio Water Development Loan for the lateral D trunk sewer phase to Campground Road Pump Station, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. James.
Thank you, President Dole. This is the first of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary resolution 81-23. Temporary resolution 82-23.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate with the county auditor in the general fund 1001 for additional funding for the sidewalk repair reimbursement program, offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 8223.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 82-23. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel?
I will save it.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 8223.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 82-23. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President. As everyone knows, this was, we funded this for $150,000 for the 2023. Those funds have already been expended. Our constituents benefit from the sidewalk repair, but also the utilization of the sidewalk. A note would be that in 2021, we expended a very small portion of the allotted funds, and in 2022, we expended about half of the allotted funds. We did not carry those forward for the sidewalk program. I would like to see us pass this tonight. It's an additional $50,000 to fund this program for the remainder of the year.
Thank you, Mr. McDaniel. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 82-23 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 83-23.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to dispense with competitive bidding and enter into a contract with Chapman Ford according to the State of Ohio's Cooperative Purchasing Program for the purchase of 2 police vehicles for use by the Lancaster Police Department and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 8323.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 83-23. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel?
Yes, the reason for the suspension is these vehicles are currently on the lot of Chapman Ford. They're being held specifically for Lancaster Police Department. These vehicles were budgeted for. Ford could not deliver. The PD went out and found these vehicles sitting on the lot, asked the Chapman Ford to reserve them for us, and if we don't get those vehicles, another police department somewhere else will.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 8323.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 83-23. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel?
Nothing additional.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 83-23 passes 9-0. Temporary Resolution 84-23.
A resolution authorizing the City of Lancaster to apply for grant funding from the Ohio Department of Development, offered by Mr. Ailes and seconded by Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. Ailes.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend the rules and waive the second and third readings of resolution temporarily numbered 84-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 84-23. Discussion, Mr. Ailes. Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Mr. Ailes.
Mr. President, I move that we pass and engross and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 84-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 84-23. Discussion, Mr. Ailes. Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 84-23 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 85-23.
A resolution to create a new fund for the One Ohio Opioid Settlement Fund 2042 and set up a revenue and expense accounts. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of two readings.
First two readings on temporary resolution 85-23, temporary resolution 86-23.
A resolution to create a new fund for the Timber Top TIF Fund 2060 and to set up revenue and expense accounts. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 86-23, temporary resolution 87-23.
A resolution to amend the certificate of appropriations and other sources with the county auditor, appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the general fund 1001, increase receipts and complete a fund transfer in the special projects fund 2037. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 87-23, temporary resolution 88-23.
A resolution of intent to transfer the assets and operations of Lancaster Fairfield Public Transit to Fairfield County, to authorize the Fairfield County Board of Commissioners to apply for grants on behalf of Lancaster's Fairfield Public Transit, and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. James.
Mr. Schoonover.
First of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 88-23. Are there any further resolutions to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? If not, we'll move to the reading of ordinances, beginning with the third reading of temporary ordinance 14-23.
An ordinance to repeal and replace Lancaster Codified Ordinance Part 11, Planning and Zoning Code, Title 3, Zoning and Property Restrictions, Chapter 1121 through Chapter 1161, including Appendix B and C of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Lancaster. Offered by Mr. Ayers and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. Ayers.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion to replace temporary ordinance 1423 by replacing a temporary ordinance 1423 star. I was given to the clerk in writing prior to tonight's meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend temporary ordinance 14-23 and replace it with temporary ordinance 14-23 star as given to the clerk in writing prior to the meeting. Discussion, Mr. Ayers. Discussion on the motion to amend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to amend carries 9-0. We now have before us temporary ordinance 14-23 star. Mr. Ayers.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 14-23 star. No, star, sorry.
Just one. That's all right.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 14-23 star. Discussion, Mr. Ayers.
Yeah, I just, again, want to thank Holly Matty and the city planning department for the work they did. Though I still have a few issues with it, I think it's a good code overall.
Thank you very much. Is there further discussion on the motion to pass? Yes, Mr. James.
Just one quick comment. I've had an opportunity to spend a lot of time with our planning department recently, and fortunately for me, they were patient with me, and I do appreciate that significantly. I think we have some very confident leadership in that particular area, and I appreciate all the work that's been done to put this very understandable code. Sure, I've got a little heartburn over a couple of things, but I'm not about to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I think we definitely have a good code in place.
Thank you, Mr. James. Further discussion? Yes, Mr.
I would just like to
Ailes.
thank, you listened to us, and we appreciate that. I think we all had some heartache with a certain piece of it, and you fixed it. Not completely, but I think you fixed it enough that I'm satisfied. I think other people were satisfied, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ailes. Further discussion? There's been a lot of discussion and debate about this. This is the last chance for the foreseeable future. So before we move on, anyone have a comment?
Oops.
Okay, please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
No.
Temporary ordinance 14-23 star passes 8-1. We now have first reading on a series of ordinances, beginning with temporary ordinance 16-23.
An ordinance to amend permanent ordinance 13-23, repeal and replace existing permanent ordinance 13-23, offered by Mr. Ailes and seconded by Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. Ailes.
First of 3 readings, please.
First of 3 readings on temporary ordinance 16-23, temporary ordinance 17-23.
An ordinance to authorize the mayor to negotiate and enter into an agreement to purchase real property from Anchor Hawking LLC and to declare an emergency, offered by Mr. Matlin, seconded by Mr. Ayers.
Mr. Matlin.
I make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary ordinance 1723.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary ordinance 17-23. Discussion, Mr. Matlin?
Yes, the city's been looking for a long time for a piece of property for a firehouse, and they've been able to negotiate this one, and they need to act as quickly as possible so we can secure it. So that's why we're asking for suspension.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion to suspend? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Mr. Matlin.
Yes, Mr. President, I make a motion that council pass and grows and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 1723.
Mr. Ailes.
Second.
There we are. A motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 17-23. Discussion, Mr. Matlin?
No, I think we said it all.
Okay. Discussion on the motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 17-23 passes 9-0. Temporary ordinance 18-23.
An ordinance authorizing a joint economic development district contract between the City of Lancaster and Violet Township and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Ailes and seconded by Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. Ailes.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend the rules and waive the second and third readings of ordinance temporarily numbered 18-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary ordinance 18-23. Discussion, Mr. Ailes. Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Mr. Ailes.
Mr. President, I move that we pass and engross and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 18-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 18-23. Discussion, Mr. Ailes.
I'm not sure I understand why they would want to do this, but I really have no objection, and I'm trusting the mayor and the powers that be that this is a good thing for the city of Lancaster, so.
It's probably a neutral thing for us and a good thing for them is what I'm
Yes.
guessing, but nevertheless. Okay. Further discussion on the motion to pass? Yes, Mr. Schoonover.
That's like what we alluded to earlier, private sector versus government. Yeah. There it is.
I got it.
Any other discussion? Okay, please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 18-23 passes 9-0. Are there any other ordinances to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? If not, we have no tabled legislation tonight. Is there any unfinished business that anyone would like to address? Seeing no hands, we'll move on to new business. Is there any new business that anyone would like to address this evening? Okay, then we will ask the clerk, please read our announcement of scheduled meetings.
Next regular session, or the next two regular sessions of City Council, August 28th. The meeting following is September the 11th, both meetings here at 6:30 PM in council chambers. Upcoming committee meetings for the next 30 days. IT Telecom, August 18th at 8 AM at the 1897 Conference Room. Service, Service, August 25th at 7:30 AM at the 1897 Conference Room. Finance, August 28th at 6 PM here in council chambers. Safety, September the 11th at 8:30 AM in the 1897 Conference Room. Finance, September the 11th at 6 PM here in council chambers. And finally, the water pollution, September 13th at 8:30 AM at the 1897 Conference Room.
Thank you very much. Are there any bills?
There is a bill, and I want to just make a little note. MNCO now charges a fee to use our credit card, so instead of saying MNCO payable to PNC, it's just going to be MNCO because I refuse to pay that fee of 3%, save taxpayer money. So MNCO, $68.05 for publication of legislation.
How much?
$68.05.
We're working on fixing this, right? So we don't have to pay them anymore and get it on the website?
So it depends on what it is.
Oh,
Yeah.
they're still going to get some money from us?
Yeah, sorry. The state operating budget made it so certain things could be done by just publication on the state notice website, but other things still have to be
Published in the paper.
in the actual paper of general circulation in the county. So, yes.
Can't that
Hopefully
be
it will
like the-
reduce, but it will not completely get rid of these bills.
I don't, hope there's no one here from the executive. Can it be Town Crier? Can't that be the circulated newspaper? Okay, let's just check.
Sorry.
All right.
Sorry, we don't get to pick.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, go ahead. You want to talk about paying the bill? That's where we're at.
No, you go ahead and
Okay,
finish
we
that,
got to
then
vote
I
on
have
that, and then
I have a
we'll,
brief comment.
okay, we'll do that in just a second. All right, so we got to pay the bill. All those in favor of paying, we need a motion.
I was waiting.
Go ahead. I was having a
Make
little fit, but I'm
motion
over
to
it.
pay the bill.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pay the bill. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll pay that one bill. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
So on August 23rd, which I believe is a week from Wednesday at 10 a.m., we'll have another groundbreaking of the Clear Sky Long-Term Care Hospital out on River Valley Boulevard, kind of across the street from Target, where Fairfield Diagnostic Imaging was at one time. So it's another big positive news for Lancaster. I think you should have all received an invitation to that. If not, you will, or see me and I'll give you more details if needed. So I'd like to see all of you there.
Great. Thank you very much. With that, a motion to adjourn is in order.
Mr. President, I'd like to make that motion. We adjourn.
Second.
A motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Please remember to sign your legislation. Have a great week. We are adjourned.